Yo, what's up, everybody? It is Tuesday, December 3rd. We're into December already. 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today will be Christmas Eve. Think about it. The years are just going by so fast. I'm 67. I'm going to be 68. And I found out from my boxing club that next year in May, still a long ways off, but next year in May, they're going to have a Masters tournament. Yours truly, I'm going to compete. And it goes by age, but I could have, it's like a 10-year spread. Like I could fight somebody 10 years less or 10 years older than me. So maybe I'll be 68, maybe I'll get somebody who's 78, or maybe I'll get somebody who's 58. But like, I spar at my club, but I've never done any competitive boxing. Not that this is really competitive, but I'm gonna go for it. Anyway, it's a long ways off, but it should be fun. All right. So MMT recognizes that the non-governmental sector, that's the non-government of the United States, and everything which is not the U.S. government, that's all of us, that's the rest of the world, that's households, that's individuals, that's institutions, that's other countries. The non-government is a net creditor. Now, what does that mean? It means we own 36 or 37 trillion worth of government securities, okay? So we are the creditor. So these interest rate changes are very impactful to us, the non-government, because we own those securities. So either we're going to get paid more in interest when the interest rate is increased by the Fed, or we're going to lose income on balance. Okay, at least interest income. Okay, there's still government transfers that are happening in the form of, salaries, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, military pay, a million different things that the government spends money on, which flows to income of vendors or individuals or institutions or whatever. Okay, so I mean, that's separate from personal interest income. Personal interest income is affected by whatever the rate is that the Fed sets. And because we, the non-government, is a net creditor, and don't forget, the reason why you have to focus on the United States is simply because U.S. Treasuries are the most widely held security in the whole entire world. Okay? I mean, it's okay to look at other countries like China and Japan and Germany and Canada and Australia, but those are secondary, if not, in third or fourth place compared to the fact that the dollar is the most widely held currency, and the dollar is held in the form of U.S. government securities. So you know how I talk about the first derivative is the fiscal is the first derivative. It's the same concept here. Like you have to have the United States as the core of any analysis, just by virtue of the fact that the whole entire world holds U.S. government securities. And so the impact to income is significant. It's substantial. All right. Every time when the Fed changes interest rates, and I'm not talking about, you make a 25 basis point, okay, that's not a lot. But over time, if the Fed is in a rate cutting mode, that's going to reduce personal interest income globally, and vice versa. If the Fed is in a rate hike mode, as we saw, that's going to increase personal interest income globally. So it's really important. It's very important. And I always stick to this stuff. Like I have a framework. I tell you guys, I have a framework, and I don't get all jittery and nervous because the price, fluctuates one day or a couple of days. If my framework is telling me that a certain thing is happening policy-wise, whether that be monetary policy with the Fed adjusting rates, and again, I don't look at it like all these crazy monetarists, like, oh, they're cutting rates, it's bullish, blah, blah, blah. No, you have to look at it. You have to look at it in the context of transfers. You have one entity in the whole entire world, which is the United States government, which literally finances the global economy. When you think about China and its export-driven economy, how does that happen? It happens from deficit spending of the United States government that flows to incomes here. We buy stuff in China, they earn the dollars, they hold the dollars in treasuries, same thing. So this is the engine. Without, unequivocally, the U.S. and the federal government and the size of its expenditures, that is the engine that drives the entire world's economy. Everything else is layered beneath that, okay? It's like, sometimes you hear me talk about the multiplier effect. When I talk about impact to GDP, for example, if they cut interest income or if they cut spending, then the initial effect is somebody's not going to have as much money. Then that person, because he has less money, that person's going to spend less wherever, at the grocery store, at the gas station, at the the movie theater, at the restaurant. Then the restaurant has less money. So maybe he's got to lay off a couple of servers or cooks. Then that person has less money. So then they spend less at the grocery store and wherever, Amazon. So there's a multiplier effect. So you got the engine, which is the United States government. And again, don't attack. I know some of you are going to come at me like, oh, you're all for government and you think government is the answer. No, I don't. Why the hell do you think I moved to Florida? There's freedom here. I could do what I want. I buy guns. I go shooting. Like, nobody's telling me what to do. I got out of these states with no taxes here, okay? At least no income taxes. So don't come at me like, oh, you're for government and you think the government. No, I'm a capitalist, okay? But I understand that that's the engine that drives everything. Okay? So, and beneath that, you have layers. So the trickle-down effect, whatever happens, with government spending here, then it affects all these other countries. And then they adjust. Maybe they adjust their monetary. Maybe they adjust their fiscal. This is the engine here. And you have to understand that. That has to be the first derivative of any analytical framework if you're going to go with fundamental. If you're going with charts, that's a whole different thing. I don't really do that, okay? I spent a large part of my early career as a trader looking at charts, and it never really did me much good, all right? I'll tell you what did do me good. When I was hooked up, in other words, had some kind of insider or some kind of advantage. And I had those situations in the past. And that's why I always tell you guys, like, a lot of these, the algo shops for sure. Guys like, what's his name, who runs Citadel? I forget his name, but he's really very, very wealthy guy, buying up most of Miami. Ken Griffin, right, who runs Citadel. His firm, they're set up to front run orders from Schwab and Fidelity and Vanguard. They have deals with them. His firm buys the order flow. He has his computers right there at the New York Stock Exchange or at the data center out in Chicago, and they front run the orders. When I had the edge like that in some of the places where I traded in different exchanges, I made a lot of money doing that. And it wasn't illegal, okay? So don't think I was breaking the law. It was kind of like frowned upon other traders if they knew I was doing it, and some did. They got pissed off, and I understand, because it was like sour grapes. They didn't have that connection, but I built that connection. I had it. I didn't always have it, and I'll tell you this, when I didn't have it anymore, I wasn't very good. I went back to my chopping, because I was buying, selling, and I keep telling you guys, that's not how you want to approach this. And I've made more money as a stock investor in this recent phase of my career than I did as a floor trader, and with the exception of the times when I had those connections. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So the U.S. government is the engine of global economic growth, okay? That's why even when they look at, when you get a headline, China's doing this and the stimulus, I don't even really pay much attention to that, because China's basically, it's running its economy, I wouldn't say completely, but in a big way off of exports to the United States, all right? So I want to say that. Number two, what I want to talk about. A lot of you guys, you talk about, the government's spending too much money, the government's spending too much money. As if the government just kind of on its own thinks, let's spend all this money on whatever, okay? You got to understand that we have like a democracy, or actually it's a republic, all right? We have a representative democracy. We elect representatives who go to Washington and vote for what we put them in office for. Well, presumably, ostensibly anyway. We elect people, they give us a pitch, they give us a campaign, they tell us, they're going to do this or that. We vote for the people who say the things, who say that they're going to do the things that we want them to do. We send them off to Washington, and hopefully they vote in our interest. And that's how the spending is decided. It's kind of decided by us, okay? It's not like the government on its own somewhere in a dark room says, we're going to spend on this and this and that. I mean, it's we the people, all right? That's number one. Number two, the money supply. This is the most over-commented, discussed thing that I have ever seen. And most people have zero understanding of it. First of all, when they talk about the money supply, most of these geniuses, they're referring to M2. M2 is demand deposits and cash. So checking accounts and cash, okay? That is a tiny, tiny fraction. What the real money supply, as I've said to you guys in the past, is the 36, 37 trillion of so-called debt. That's dollars that the government has spent into the economy over the last, 200 some odd years, that sits with us. We have it, okay? It didn't take it back. We own it. We have it in the form of government securities. That's the real money supply. But all these geniuses, when they say money supply, they're referring to M2, which is checking accounts and cash. How many people even have, well, we have checking accounts, but that's a small little fraction. And then they're saying like, the Fed got to control the money supply. Once again, it's us that controls the money supply. The money supply is affected every time we go to get a loan. When you get a loan from a bank, a deposit is created, even if the bank doesn't have the reserves to back that deposit, because they need to have a certain amount of reserves per deposit. Even if the bank doesn't have the reserves, if you are a qualified borrower, if you're a credit-worthy borrower, they'll make the loan to you. You now have a checking account with some money in it. The bank will either borrow the reserves, but in the meantime, if it doesn't have the reserves, what happens? The Fed automatically does an overdraft. There's an overdraft in the bank's account, just like you might have an overdraft if you get hit with a bill and it's deducted from your checking account and then all of a sudden you have an overdraft. But in the case of banks, the Fed will cover the overdraft. It will put the reserves in for the bank. The bank has to give it back to the Fed. It borrows it from other banks. But that's how money is created. It's not the Fed saying, oh, let's juice up the money supply. No. The money supply is created. You know, when I used to be at Fox, there was a girl there. I'm not going to mention her name. I think she's still there. She was in Fox Business. And boy, she thought she knew everything. Okay? And she used to say stuff like, you know, it's so easy to control the economy because all you would need is a computer to control the money supply. So she was taking this right from the old-fashioned Milton Friedman, all you have to do is control the money supply. We control the money supply by virtue of the fact that every time we go and get a loan from anywhere, a bank, a non-bank, that's us controlling the money supply. And then when we pay that loan back, that money disappears. It goes away. So it's all of us collectively who control the money supply. Not some, technocrat inside the Fed saying, I'm going to dial up the money supply right now. Or I'm going to dial it down. Or like this chick was saying, let's just get a computer and regulate the economy with the money supply. You see why I left Fox? I got sick and tired of dealing with these people trying to explain. Trying to explain. One time I had a guy, he's an economist who's a professor of economics at some university. I forget which one it was. And I said to him, tax cuts are the fiscal equivalent of spending increases. And spending cuts are the fiscal equivalent of tax increases. And he was like, what? You don't know what you're talking about. It blew his mind. And I said, look, in a tax cut, you got money in your pocket, right? If you owed $100 to the government and now you only owe $50, it's like somebody put $50 in your pocket. So it's the same thing as the government sending you a check for $50. So a tax cut is the equivalent of a spending increase and vice versa. And this guy wouldn't have it. And I knew he was going to be like that. But this is why I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Because first of all, television is an awful medium for this because you got 30 seconds. If you're lucky, you got a minute to make your point. Podcasts are probably better. I started to do, I used to do a podcast. I don't do it anymore because nobody listened. Just like nobody watches this channel. I don't even know why I do this. The stuff I talk about, it is not like something that's ever going to be broadly embraced. Okay, let's just face it. I understand that. I mean, I don't have to do these things. I don't have to write my report. I do it not only to help people, but it helps me. Like, it makes me be a better analyst, economist. It helps me understand my process of how I do things. I mean, it's a very beneficial thing. If you do something at a high level and you have to explain it to somebody or you have to teach it to somebody, I mean, you really get inside of it in your own head, in your own, how it's done. And that's beneficial. Anyway, I went longer than I thought I was going to go, but thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and please go to my website. Check it out. Sign up. 30-day free trial, MMT Trader. Go to pitbulleconomics.com. See you tomorrow. Bye.